So, as you could tell, I just got through running across the cornfields with my dogs to come over here on a Saturday and say hi to everybody. So I'll get better at this. We'll get higher quality in the editing room because I do all my own production too. Anyway, again, love you guys. Go say hi to somebody. Just wave at somebody. Start there. Just wave at some people. Younger people, older people. I did that backwards, didn't I? Younger people, older people. Just go out and say hi. Let's start. There was a hashtag that Barbie wants to get started. I'll have to look that up. I'll have to look through some of the old films. We need to be pulling together and discussing these items, and not be afraid to have a dinner. What do they call it? Table dinner, or around the dinner table. Politics is a device to keep this country moving forward. I know that all the people in the middle class want this country to keep moving forward. I also know that the politicians we have currently in place on both sides of the aisle, some way more than others, but we have a situation now where the politicians don't want us to necessarily move forward. They want, in our education and our information to be lower and lower so that they can control more. They have very perfect lives, really. And these are the things we don't understand. You know, we need to really be able to have the courage and have the patience to be looking at our politicians more directly, with more information. As I've said before, we have a utopia coming, and if we don't have control over our politicians, as that utopia comes, then we won't have that utopia. We will be moved into whatever needs that the country has, without the rewards. This middle class of America has been stronger and done more than my own. I know I'm biased, but than any other. As a matter of fact, all the middle classes, around the world, is what the economy is built on, and we have no say at how that money is spent.
Hey everybody, how you doing? I'm Rodd Duff. I'm your host. You know what? Before I go on, every time I sit down behind this microphone for insights and straight talk, and my phone goes off, I forgot to turn that off. This one I'm not doing on purpose. I did a mistake. But anyway, anytime I sit behind this microphone here on Insights and Straight Talk, I'm reminded that every one of us carries two stories. The one that people think they know, and the one that we survive in silence, and the written word. My own story has been written in the battles fought, the scars collected, and the pages filled in late night moments when the world just got too heavy to hold. I didn't start writing because I wanted to be an author. I started writing because, I just needed a place to bleed. Thousands of poems, journals, stacked like bricks, and eventually a memoir titled WTF happened when I was in my 50s, because I generally needed to understand the collapse, the heartbreak, the losses, and the unexpected rebuilding that came after. Writing, well, it became my healing. It turned pain into clarity, confusion into honesty, and failure into a flashlight that could shine through the darkest corners of my life and honestly, the cracks of my soul. And I say that because today's guest understands that journey better than almost anyone I've ever met. David E. Feldman, creator of Dora, Ellison, mysteries, and the Hammer and the Thorpe thrillers. A man whose real life is as gripping as the fiction he writes. Born in Brooklyn, living in Long Beach, David is a survivor in every sense of the word. Listen to this. He's endured depression, cancer, spinal fusion, hip replacements, intestinal surgeries, and even a double hernia operation, just to throw it in. And he has stayed clean and sober for over 30 years. 3 decades to stay the course when life tries to knock you back into old habits. 3 decades of choosing clarity over escape. And through it all, he keeps creating. He writes, he paints, he plays music. I love that. And he keeps moving. He keeps living. He just keeps fighting. And when you read his novels, you can feel it. Because the grit on his pages is the grit in his life. The resilience in his characters comes straight from the resilience in his bones. He is living proof that a story isn't started over when it hits you hard. Sometimes that's exactly where the story begins. That's what connects our journeys, his and mine. We're 2 men from 2 different worlds, both writing to heal, both turning trauma, failure, and reinvention into something that can help someone else stand up. My thousands of poems and his dozens and dozens of published works come from the same place, a refusal to let pain be the period at our sentence in life. And today we're going to explore those interactions, how trauma, recovery, faith also shapes characters he creates, how real world injustice, corruption, and human hope fuel newer worlds he builds, how a man can go through hell in his own life and still create characters who fight back, who rise up, who never quit, even when the system is against them. And that, my friends, is the heartbeat of the show. Because the middle class knows something about being pushed around by systems bigger than us. We know something about fighting through setbacks, rebuilding after collapse, and trying to hold our families together while the world keeps shifting underneath our feet. When David writes about ordinary people forced into extraordinary battles, that's us. When his characters push against injustice, corruption, and chaos, that is the middle class he writes for. And when he turns pain into purpose on the page, that mirrors the mission of this entire platform. So whether you're 16 and figuring out how about your place in the world full of pressure and unpredictability, or you're 63 and rebuilding after the storms of life you never saw coming, today's conversation's for you. Because healing isn't pretty, reinvention isn't linear, and writing, whether it's poems, novels, prayers, or simply the next sentence in your own life, can become a way back to yourself. That's why we're here today, to learn, to ask, to feel, to fight, and to remember that no matter what chapter you're in, your story's still being written. And as David E. Feldman reminds us, sometimes the most broken characters can become the most unforgettable heroes. Now let's get into it. How you doing, David?
I am doing really well. Thank you for that wonderful introduction. I'd like to bottle that and send it out to my family and friends. Thank you.
Well, put it on a recording or something that types out the words. Actually, I've got notes. I could email them to you if you really wanted to.
Well, I think it's probably on the, on the recording of the show. So
It is 100%.
Yeah.
Well, let's hope
Yeah.
so, because if it isn't, something's gone wrong.
Thank you for your kind words. You're making me cry here. Thank you for that wonderful, very generous words.
Thank you very much. I told you in the green room how our journeys align a lot more than some other guests on the show, right? There's a lot of things that go in. So as we were talking about this and I was getting information, and I always what we call scrape for information for our upcoming guests, so we can at least, it's not aesthetically perfect, but I don't want to be too profound, profoundly horrible. So as I was going through the information, it was interesting how, to a degree, aligned we are. And that's why I said two different men in two different worlds, but still passing the same journey. We talk about AA and oh God, I'm going to blank on the other one. Narcotics, ANA, yeah, and you know, and depression and mental health. Which, by the way, 70% of humans in the civilized world, that's children and adults, 70% of all deal with some sort of mental health. Now that can be very varied, but yeah, it's a thing. It's a thing, and I'm really glad that we're going to be able to have that conversation and talk about your books and how your characters get into that. And by the way, I did forget to tell you, somewhere towards the end, if you could put your contact information, so because I don't want it to be mixed in the comments. I want it to be down towards the last of the comments. So towards the end of the show, as it feels like it's coming to a wrap, just copy and paste in the private notes. I don't know why you can't do it in the comments, but something I deal with. Right in that, I'll copy and paste into the comments, because you know what happens. You've done a bunch of these. Somebody will come a minute from after the show ends, a year after the show ends, a week after the show ends, and say, what did David E. Feldman mean by that? I wish I was there. I would ask them. Well, they can contact you, because if lots of people leave comments on the shows afterwards, but who knows when somebody's going to go back and answer that necessarily. So if they got your contact information.
It's a private chat.
What's that?
I see private chat and I see comments. So that's private chat.
Yeah, I mean, click on comments. I don't think you can add it into comments, but yeah, click it into private chat. I'll see a little red button there when it's on there, and then we'll handle it that way. There it is. Okay, I see it there. So towards the end, I'll copy and paste that over. Take a look.
Sure.
And put it on the screen. So we've got 185 people here already. We haven't even got into the story yet. We got a nice jump. Yeah, I mean, I told you when you were in the green room, I said, holy cow, there's already 12 people here. Now it's over 200. So they're flying.
I want to say to all of them and all.
Hey, can you turn your mic up? Can you turn your mic up just a touch?
I don't know. Hang on a second. Give me a second here.
Yeah, if it's too big of a deal, not a big deal. I just want to hear you better.
Yeah.
I got ADHD, so I want to make sure and grab what you got.
Hang on a second.
Without waiting too long to get on with the story here. If it's a multiple number thing, no biggie. Don't worry about it. I can hear you fine.
Well, you think the folks can hear me okay?
If I can hear you, they can hear it, no doubt.
Well, give me
all right, let's do this. Play with it along the way. Why don't we do this? As you know, we always like to do, and as the audience knows, let's and you can kind of look at it while you're doing your story if you want. But I want to get into, nice camera. That was perfect movement. And guys, remember I said music? Look at what he's got in the background over his shoulder there. You guys know how much I'm into music. Oh yeah, 100%. I know there's two of them back there. I see one of them.
I have a bunch of I have keyboards all over the house. After Hurricane Sandy, we have this where I live is ground zero for Hurricane Sandy. My whole city was underwater.
All right, start your story. Pull this into your story. Go for it, my man.
Well, I'm just going to tell you about that one thing, and then I'll get back. Yeah. But in 2012, October 29, 2012, we had Hurricane Sandy here, and after Hurricane Sandy, my house was underwater, and
wow.
We had a not a grand piano, an upright piano here, and it took 6 guys to get that piano out of my house.
Hey, look over my shoulder. Look over my shoulder right here.
I see it. It's a grand piano.
Baby, yeah, it's a baby. And right next to it's an upright. And in my house, growing up with producer Barbie all the time, We oh wow, the questions are already starting.
We have
We always had a grand, and we had a
well,
harp. I'm a singer. I'm a singer myself. My mom is a keyboard player. She owns a music company, but that's another story for another day. Go ahead, David.
I just
You
wanted to
opened up some fond memories.
just wanted to touch on this. We had to get the piano out of the house, and we had a heck of a time doing it. So
Oh
what
my
I did
gosh.
was we bought it looks just like an upright piano, but it weighs nothing. It's an electric piano that looks like an upright piano. In
Oh
my
wow.
living where the old one was, it's beautiful looking. It's made by Yamaha.
Wow.
I own 4 Yamahas, and I have that, and I've got a bunch of traveling keyboards that I take to, restaurants and bars and people's homes, and
Different gigs.
I play a lot for seniors, and they love it, boy. And it's fun, and I play all the Sinatra stuff in the new and the 50s, and up through about the 80s, up through about Elton John and Billy Joel and the Beatles and like that. We just came back from New Orleans. We saw Paul McCartney 2 weeks ago in New Orleans.
No way.
Yeah, third time we've seen him. Unbelievable. If I could see one person, it would be him.
That there is definite brilliance. There's definite brilliance in every industry, and definitely you just named off the top of the cream of the of the milk. The very top. We've got a half a dozen questions here. We're gonna sprinkle music in throughout. I guarantee it, because I'm trying to do more and more with musicians, and there's a reason why. But so how did this all get going with you?
Okay.
You and I talked about that.
I'm looking at the questions here, and what I'm going to say really does address some of the questions. So let me just start off with this. I was born in Brooklyn, but I didn't live there very long. We moved to Valley Stream, New York, which is just east of Kennedy Airport, at the beginning of South Nassau County, when I was a little kid. And I'm from a Jewish family. My parents didn't pay much attention to the religion, but that's who we are. And growing up, I lived in a town that was 100% white. My town was 100% white. And like I said, my family is Jewish, but not observant. Now, I heard from my neighbors and from the kids at school that it's not good to be Jewish. I heard a lot about how it's not a good thing. I was 6 years old, and some kids, big kids, are playing.
That's not new, is it, David? That's not. I mean, it is new. Sorry, that's still going on. That hasn't changed.
Bigotry is
throughout
forever.
history, right? And I don't get why, but right?
I'll tell you what. Because one of my standalone books is about that, about the first family of color that moved to Valley Stream. And what happened there was my mother went over to people in the neighborhood burned a cross in their lawn. Okay, the first black family in town.
Oh,
and my mom.
It was during that time. It was during that time.
Yeah.
Oh
yeah.
my goodness.
One of my books is about that. It's a fiction. The book is fiction. It's not about the actual family, although I kind of knew the actual family. But my mom went over to their house and she knocked on the door, and this woman, a woman of color, came to the door, and my mom said, "You know what? I just want you to know, some of us want you here. Some of us are welcoming you here," and that's my mom.
That was a big deal back then. That was not.
Yeah.
Although you grew up in similar, I mean, there's still that prejudice.
I heard the N word. I heard the word for being Jewish, and the K word for being Jewish. Now the kids I hung out with were mostly Italian American and Irish American and German American, with a Jewish kid here and there sprinkled in. And to be fair to them, they called each other these names too. But what eventually happened is, decades later, when I saw some of them on Facebook, I was very surprised to see they have blended families now. So some of them grew up and they got to know people who were different from them, because I think that's where this comes from. We hear from our parents and grandparents around the dinner table about this N word or that K word or whatever. And But then we get to know the people, and we realize they're people. And that's what that book, The Neighborhood, that I wrote about, this first family, was about. They got to know the people in the neighborhood, and they realized they're human beings too.
That's the good thing about this discussion and that book, because the only way that happens, the only way that this stuff has happened, is one out of fear to a degree, or but not knowing. Anytime you would get to know somebody, to actually get to know them, then they're just like you. We talk about this all the time on your show. I don't care what collagen you have on your skin or what religion or whatever. If you're my neighbor, we got the same issues. You got kids.
You open up my chest, it's the same heart. But we don't know that until we get to know. And some people don't go that far. But what I'm getting at, in the bigger picture, it all starts with trauma. So when I was 6 years old, and I was told by these 16-year-olds in the schoolyard next to my house, don't come out of your house. Are you Jewish? What's your name? They said. What's your name? I said, baby. And they said, are you Jewish? And I said, yeah. And they said, well, you go back in your house and don't come out again until you're not Jewish anymore. I was 6. Wow. I didn't go to school for a week, man. So it comes from trauma. I was around a lot of violence. I was around a lot of trauma. I was around a lot of stuff I couldn't express and I couldn't cope with as a child. And for me, how I came to be able to cook, life was above my pay grade. And what helped me to be able to engage with the world around me was books. When I was a little kid, I read books, and my mother read books to me. My mom was a reading teacher, and she read me things like A Wrinkle in Time, and
good book. Really good.
Wonderful book. And I read things like Robert Silverberg or like Dune. I read sci-fi when I was a little kid. I loved sci-fi. I loved Isaac Asimov. I loved the story, The 9 Billion Names of God, where these priests are naming God, by the official names from religions. And when they finish, the stars start going out in the sky. And I loved sci-fi. And as I got older, I read other things. I fell in love with John Steinbeck as a teenager.
Yeah.
And as a young adult, I fell in love with the book East of Eden, which is kind of about Cain and Abel.
It is.
And the Grapes of Wrath. But East of Eden was my favorite book for a long time. And eventually, I fell in love with mysteries and thrillers and decided I'm going to start writing. And that's what I do. I've been doing that.
So that's the actual thing that put you onto that path, huh? Was the love of the words. But then when you hit that, you can tell obviously because that's what you're writing about. Give the 2 series names. I know I called them off, but go ahead and say that again.
Yeah. So the Dora Ellison mystery series and the Hammer and Sharpe noir mystery thrillers. And if I could take a minute and tell you, Dora Ellison is someone who had childhood trauma. She witnessed her father beating up her mother. And in the prequel, she launches herself at her father to try to get him to stop. And she's not able to get him to stop. And so she grows up with this trauma. And it's buried, and it's buried. And in book one, she's in a relationship with a police officer, a female police officer. So, why I wrote about lesbian women, I have no idea. It wasn't my intent, but she showed up and she told me to write about her, so I did. But this woman, her police officer girlfriend is getting calls from a robotic voice, a disguised voice, saying, you got to investigate this murder that wasn't a murder. And the murder takes place in the opening scene. But what happens is she's traumatized. She has this buried trauma. And when her lover investigates, something happens. Something terrible happens. And Dora has to investigate herself. She has to look into it herself. And what happens is she has this beast in her that she doesn't even know is there. And when she runs into abusers or are violent people, or anyone who is preying, bullies, people who prey on people who are weaker than them. She has to do something about it. Something in her, this beast in her heart comes out, and she's got. Who she's like, and she was kind of inspired by, I have to say, Lee Child's character Jack Reacher, who is someone in the books much more than in the TV show, who, when he sees a town being run by a bunch of tough knuckleheads who are just beating people up in bars and kicking them while they're down, he does something about it. And that's how Dora is. In fact, early in every book, she runs into someone who's a bully, and it's the foreshadowing of what's going to happen later. And she does something about it. In book 1, she's at the supermarket, and these
let's David, if you could. I don't want to get too far behind the questions here because it'll lead right back into where you're going there. And then I also want to hear a similar synopsis of the other series. We'll wait for that a little bit further down the road because I want to be able to mix the energy in. And like you were saying, there's some really good questions in here, and they really work well. So I'm gonna. Do you want to read them or you want me to read them? I don't either way. I like reading them just for.
Pick out what resonates with you.
So let's go with Justina here. New face and name. This one's new. I usually recognize them from because I see them every day. Different ones. But okay. So wow, David's story is so inspiring. How do you stay motivated after so much hardship? We both know this story, man, right?
So for me, it's not how do I stay motivated. It's how do I stop writing? Because listen, you take an orange, you squeeze an orange, you get orange juice, and if you squeeze me, and I'm easily squeezed.
Hey, can I pause you for a second there? We're floating, and I've been watching it for the last several minutes. But we're floating right around 500, just kind of 500 people in the audience. So we're kind of hovering there. I told you I'd use that word somewhere in there. But go ahead with what you're saying. I just wanted to get that up. Oh, and please subscribe. We're trying to get to 10,000. It really helps our cause and keeps this story moving along. So I won't do that every 5 minutes, but I just wanted to let you know we got we're back and forth over that 500 lines.
Okay. Squeeze an orange, you get an orange juice. You squeeze me, and like I said, I'm easily squeezed, and you get stories. That's what comes out of me. That is how I cope day to day. Writing for me is so cathartic. It's what I do, and I don't have a problem with being blocked with writer's block because I'm always writing every day. I do spend a lot of time also on the marketing end because I'm my own stuff. So
I know exactly what you're saying there. I want to move on to Gerard. Now, Gerard, he's a pretty regular attender here. Appreciate you being back, brother. And at what moment in your life? I said before, let's hold on Dora there because I saw there was a number of questions about both series. So right here, Dora, what inspired that? You were into it a little bit there, and that's why I wanted to hold you off because you were going right into. And I want to, these guys are spending their time. They're investing their time in us. Now they're doing it because they want to. But I want to make sure I get to each of their questions. I want to say to your
listeners, and to the folks who are taking the time out of their busy days to write us notes, thank you. Thank you for being here. Thank you for, being part of this show and for your time and your attention. So, here's what has inspired some of the things that Dora does, and I'll give you two of them. But there are things that I have done. And I'm a little embarrassed to tell you this, but I have done things like this. I have lost my temper brutally in some public situations. So one thing Dora does is she's in the supermarket, and then she's on the 10 items or less line, and she's behind a kid, 14-year-old kid. And in front of the kid is a big dude who's about 45 years old, and he's got 15 items, 10 items or less. And the kid who's in front of her says, "Excuse me, sir, I think you got too many items. I kind of should be over there." And the guy puts his face right up to the kid and he says, "Oh yeah, what you gonna do about it?" And Dora is triggered. Dora's trauma is triggered. And she reaches down under the counter and she grabs the guy by the and the guy suddenly goes, "Oh, never mind," and he changes lines, In another book early on, and these are foreshadows because later she's going to run into the real brutal enforcer. And in one of the other books, she's driving along and she sees a guy beating his dog on the street. It's a pretty big dog. It's a Doberman. It's a Doberman. And she pulls her car over. She gets out of the car. She beats the hell out of this guy. She takes the dog and she keeps the dog. The dog becomes part of the stories. And so one thing I want to mention about her, and then we go to the next question if you like, is that early in book one, her lover, Francesca, says, they're going to start a martial arts league around here. You should join it. And Dora says, "What are you talking about?" And Franny says, "You love martial arts, and you're physically the strongest person I know," because she is a garbage collector at the beginning of book one, and she heaves these garbage cans over her shoulder into the back of the garbage truck. So she's physically very strong. But what she learns is she tries out for this martial arts league at Franny's suggestion, and she finds out that she's a savant at martial arts. She knows a lot about it. And I've been a fight fan since the mid-1960s when I watched Cassius Clay, before he was Muhammad Ali, fighting Carl Mildenberger in 1966 or 67. And I did a little boxing and I did a little martial arts, and I'm a big MMA fan today. And,
I love MMA.
Not that I'm so good at those things, but I've done a little. I got my ribs busted. That's a lesson I learned there. Anyway, so that's a little bit about Dora. Why did I choose a garbage collector? You know what, Chris?
Instead of a detective for Dora, because they're kind of reversed roles. But
so let me explain that. Let me explain that to Chris. Chris, this is why.
Great question, Chris.
Years ago, one of the garbage collectors ran over a garbage can in front of my house. Okay, and I went downtown and I told them downtown about this. And the next day, they must have told him, but they also told him that it was me at my address. This guy went banging on my door and he's telling me in Spanish, "It wasn't me. What are you yelling? What'd you get me in trouble for?" And I said, Yo vi, I saw you. I said, "I saw you. You did it." And that was fresh in my head. And it somehow translated to me making her a garbage collector. Why wasn't she a detective? Because she becomes a detective unintentionally, because something happens to her police officer lover, and she steps in because she has to. She sees this thing happen, and the trauma. And if you read Jack Reacher, the books, more the TV shows, okay, Alan Richard, enormous guy, but if you read the books, you see somebody getting bullied or abused, they're going to get what's coming to them, and they do in my books. Dora could be his niece. So thank you for the question.
Yeah, it's a great question, and I promised I wouldn't keep doing this because I thought we were going to level off at that 5. We're at over 600 people on right now.
Thank you.
So please subscribe. Yeah, and it's a topic that hits home a lot on the show. So the next series of questions kind of bounce around a little bit. I was trying to, when I was off screen, what we talked about. I was trying to organize them into somewhat of a grouping together, but you've got multiple things that you're tugging at people's hearts about here. So I'm going to do this, which is a little off field, but we're talking about overall writing. So as far as Richard here, how did surviving cancer change your approach to writing? Because I want to put this in now because the rest are about both different series. So it's kind of a really great actually question, Richard, for kind of Okay, so let's step back and get into what I like to put colors between the layers, and that he sets us up really well for that. Thank you, Richard. Go ahead.
So yeah, my answer to this is kind of going to be my answer probably to a bunch of these questions, and that is, I'm very cruel to my characters, and whatever happens to me will show up in my stories. I give my characters all these diseases, all of these surgeries. I had an intestinal resection, which meant I had to wear a bag. I ended up in the hospital, and the surgeon said, "Listen, I got to take a piece out of your intestine, and you might wake up in the bed with a bag." And I said, "Wait, what?" And he said, "Yeah, you might." And I did this to one of my characters in the book I'm writing now, and I did give cancer to several of my characters because you know what? There is
makes sense.
You think you know how to deal with when you find out you have cancer, but you don't know. What I did so let me tell you, when I found out I had cancer, I was about to have my second hip replacement, right? And I got a call from this doctor, and it was right before the Jewish holidays, and I'm married to a girl who was a little more observant than me, so we shut down things here for the Jewish holidays. And by the way, I'm married to the love of my life for 40 years, 31 actually. And
How long?
We're in our 39th year of marriage. We'll be together 40 years. You know what? 2 days ago, we met 2 days ago, 40
awesome.
years ago. Yeah. But what happened when I found out I had cancer, I got a call from my doctor, and he said, "Listen, you have prostate cancer. You cannot have your hip replaced. You're going to have to wait a year," which I was already in a lot of pain with my hip, because you can't have surgery after having your cancer stuff done. And have a great holiday. See ya. Bye. And that was the end of the call. And what I did was I reached out to a friend of mine who I know on Facebook, who I knew 50 years ago in high school, who is a clergy person in Seattle. And I said,
"That's where I was born."
Really? I said she is a pastor in Washington, somewhere near Seattle. And I said, "Can we please talk? I need to talk to someone." And my rabbi had died, and I had talked to him when I had depression. But anyway, and she talked to me. I needed to talk to someone. I just was like, I was scared.
So you got to go to.
Yeah. And listen, I wasn't raised to believe in God, but I'll tell you, 12-step recovery, you got to believe in something. That's part of the deal in 12-step recovery.
And they handle that by you got to have something bigger than yourself. You got to be able to hand this off. I mean, that's the very first couple of steps, right? And a power higher than yourself, right?
That's right.
But whatever you call that. And honestly, that statement, I'll be honest with you here. Not that I haven't been to now, but that program, those first couple of steps, brought me back. I mean, I got baptized when I was 6 on my own. I mean, I felt the thing, but then life stuff happened, and different religions and so forth. But that giving yourself to a power higher than your own was my step. And this goes back a while ago, but really has brought me back to faith. So I just wanted to share that with you.
Can I tell you how, and I'll answer this question that Jeff has up here, if you like, but I'd like to just give you a real quick how that worked for me, because the straw that broke the camel's back after using drugs for 20 years was that I had this new baby son who was a year old, and I was so proud to be a father. And who am I telling how proud I am? A little guy with a hat on 35th Street, New York City, where I was buying my drugs. And my bartender at O'Reilly's, and my bartender at Keen's Chop House in New York City. I worked in Manhattan in the ad industry at the time. And one day I'm taking care of my little son who's a year old, and I'm high. And he got hurt. And it was over. It was over. I became willing to do anything. And I ended up in 12-step programs. And when we came to step 2, which is came to believe in a power greater than ourselves that could restore us to sanity, I was like, well, how do I do that? I wasn't raised to believe in anything. Nobody believed in God in my family. And my sponsor at the time, this guy, Don, who was just magnificent, said, act like you got a God in your life. And I said, how? And he said, talk to him. I said, what? He said, talk to him like he's your friend, like he's in the room. When you're on the toilet, when you're in the shower, when you're driving, and I said, what do you say? What do I say? And he said, say anything. Hey, can you send me some help? Help! Say that. Say, show me what to do. They have a prayer in NA, the third step prayer. Take my will of my life, guide me in my recovery, show me how to live. And that was my prayer early on. Anyway, so that's how that worked for me, and it's been a big part of my life since then. And I talk to God all the time. And you know what? I'm married to a scientist. That's her job. She's a scientist who looks at science as not contradictory to religion or God, as evidence.
Absolutely.
As evidence. She said, look around, go outside, look at the flowers, look at the trees. There's no God, are you kidding? Go outside.
Masterful. The masterpiece that is called Earth cannot just be, oh, well, it happened out of a couple rocks that hit us, back in 300 billion years ago.
Who's to say there's not greater consciousness? We don't understand about consciousness. Science hasn't figured out. It talks about synapses and things in our brain. Hasn't figured out the spark of I am who I am. So who's to say there's not consciousness between us? Listen, prayer works. And I know because I've tried it. I didn't believe in anything, but prayer works.
Yeah, I mean, and we talk about this on the show. It's kind of fun to relate to it back and forth here. There's the body is frequency. Your body is energy. I mean, it's a living. Obviously, we're human beings, but when you said that, it's so true because you spoke about COVID. Having, during that time we had to be 6 feet apart. Well, that's the energy field. You can feel, right, when you feel somebody kind of coming up behind you, it's that energy. So what you're saying makes 100%. We have no idea. And I love that your wife makes that point because it isn't a either or. It's a, come on, guys, just because we don't know any better doesn't mean we can't explore the reality of what's way beyond us. And that's one of the things we're talking about. Let's hit, now I'm jumping a couple here to get to Jeff because then we start getting a little, I think it falls in place really well here. Great question from Jeff.
Which character do I feel most connected to personally?
Because you were naming, now we kind of went past it, but I had put that up because you were naming a number of different characters and how you give them cancer and you give them this. And so what just a one, I know they all do, obviously, but who would you pick out of sub character?
So I have to give you my own answer. All I can tell you is my answer is they are all me. At any given day or time, they are all me. Listen, Hammer is Judah Hammer, who's named for a character in the Bible, Yehuda HaMaccabi, Judah Maccabee, and Judah Hammer is a crime boss, and he's Jewish. Because I love the idea of having a real tough MF Jewish guy I once saw a cover of a comic strip, which was a Jewish comic strip like 30, 40 years ago, and it was a guy with a machine gun saying Shabbat Shalom, MFer, and I loved it because the Jewish guys where I live weren't thought of as tough guys, and yet I was the president of one of the fraternities. The fraternities by me were essentially high school gangs, and I was in a lot of trouble as a kid. I was in a lot of trouble with my parents and with the neighborhood, and I ended up running away from home and being in gangs, basically. But let me just say, Judah Hammer is a morally ambivalent crime boss. He takes care of the little old ladies in the neighborhoods, yet he runs heroin and he runs prostitution and leg breaking in his neighborhood. Sharpe, it's Hammer and Sharpe, and Sharpe is a private investigator who's struggling with heroin addiction. And anytime time he's on the case, once he gets focused on the case, the addiction part of his mind comes alive, and he starts to crave. He starts to crave heroin. And I have to tell you, I have sponsored in recovery a bunch of heroin addicts, and they're from all over the world. The meeting I go to is a worldwide meeting. It's 24/7. It's on now. It's on all the time. And so I sponsor a guy in Egypt. I sponsored a heroin addict who was 20 years old, who shot a bag of dope and died at 21. Horror, just a horror. Big part of my life, that stuff is. Anyway, Sam Sharpe is a detective, and he's a heroin addict. And he gets into recovery, but then when he gets on the case, he has to fight with it. So am I answering the questions that come up in the window?
Yeah. No, let me set it up. Just finish your thought, and let me set up this one. The reason I brought this back is because I think we kind of got sidetracked. Because I remember saying what a great question this is, but and maybe I'm wrong. But I think we started to go there, and then we went kind of never really answered. So I wanted to get back to this because this is kind of a crux about your writing style, not about the characters, but about your writing style and how what you went through there. Because I'm a writer, right? I like that, and there are moments. You said you never have trouble being motivated. You never have writer's block. I get that. I once it starts, it's like I'm standing back and it's coming out on its own, and I only know what it was about when I go back and I proofread. Then I go, oh my God, this is so cool. No, but you had cancer, and during that process, and so how did it change the approach, and did you have to physically change anything? Because that's I know a lot about cancer.
Yeah, so that has a few different prongs to it, a few different forks to it.
I don't doubt that.
The first thing is what I was saying originally was that I gave it to my characters because all of these things are, when I go through something, I give it to my characters.
That's what it was. We went off on that. It was about your character. Richard wants to know about you.
Right, it's catharsis for me. So the writing process changes me because it enables me to express myself. I'm not bottling up the cancer, the emotional connection to the cancer. I'm talking about it in my work, and hopefully, God willing, I'm connecting with readers, and I do hear from readers from time to time about the work. Okay, the other aspect of it, how the cancer changed me, is I had to rest a little bit. I had to rest.
Exactly. That's what I was thinking. You're pulling the energy. I assume you went through chemo and all that, right?
I went through I had two kinds of radiation.
Okay.
It's funny. I'll tell you this. I'm very glad, for many reasons, I'm glad to live. I'm glad to be an American for a lot of reasons. And by the way, one of the things are you a veteran?
No, my whole family is. I came this close, but I am not personally a veteran. My sons are, a couple of them are, and my dad and uncle, and I mean they were in Vietnam. My dad did 3 tours in Vietnam, so yeah,
great.
Yeah, well, that's why that's out there.
Yeah, God bless him. So yeah, and my first book was about my uncle who was in the Flying Tigers in World War II.
No kidding.
No kidding.
My dad was a mechanic for the Flying Tigers.
Really?
A later version, obviously, not in World War II, but my dad.
And the cover of the book, which I am in the process of re-releasing, because I took it out of print because I didn't own the rights, but I got the rights back and I'm re-releasing it. The cover of it, this is crazy, is my uncle, a real picture. Nowadays you can fake the picture, but it's in fact, hang on, it's right here. I don't know if you can see this. It's my uncle.
Hold on, I'm going to take myself off so we can see better.
Yeah, this is my uncle with Chairman Mao. Chairman Mao. It's a crazy story. It's a real story. Wasn't really here to talk about that. But anyway, I asked about veterans because I do a lot of work with veterans. I have been doing the video production. I have owned a marketing company for 4 years. and it's kind of, I write full time now, and so my marketing company makes a little passive income. But I do the video and the website for an organization called the Long Beach Waterfront Warriors. It started by a first responder from 9/11, a firefighter who was at 9/11, who's a dear friend of mine named Jerry, who was a councilman here, and some family members of firefighters who were lost at 9/11 started this organization. My wife went to a meeting when this organization started 17 years ago. She put up her hand and she said, "Oh, listen, my husband will do all your video and your website for free." And I was like, honey. And I made them some videos. They had another guy doing the videos. And I have a background. I've made films. I've made TV commercials. I worked for the ad industry in the 80s, making ads for BMW and Revlon and people like that. And
wow.
They watched one of my videos and they were like, "Dude, you're working. You got to come work for us, and we're going to pay you." And they do. They pay me something. They don't pay me what I would charge a corporation. But I've been doing their work for 17 years. LongBeachWaterfrontWarriors.org. And what they do is they go to Walter Reed Hospital every year, and they bring a couple of dozen veterans, wounded veterans from Iraq and American soldiers who had served in Iraq and Afghanistan, to Long Beach, New York, put them up in a 5-star hotel in Long Beach. But they don't they do what like the Wounded Warriors does, but they bring the families too. And that's how they differ. They bring the whole family up here, and then we bring them to New York City with a police escort. They shut down the Fenwick Expressway with 5 motorcycle cops. That's how I got my Harley Street Glide, was from one of these motorcycle cops. And we bring them into New York City.
I'm a Harley guy.
Me too. I started riding when I was 61. I started riding Harleys when I was 61 when my dad died. But we bring them to New York City, and they meet with these the firefighters in New York City, and they give speeches there that'll make you cry. The speeches a lot of them are on the website. So anyway, wonderful organization, started by a first responder who got very sick after 9/11 from breathing in that crap. But he's okay. So I got off on a tangent there.
Awesome story, man. Absolutely awesome story.
I had to rest after I had cancer. I had to rest. I just want to say I had an intestinal resection where I had to wear a bag, and that's the thing that really messed me up. I woke up and my body had been mutilated. I'm pooping out my stomach, and let me tell you, I was like, after the other surgeries, I was okay. I would have a couple of rough
that's
days.
a mental thing now. That's a mental thing with it, right?
After the cancer, I had radiation. I was okay, but after this thing, I was like, hello. I was just so beat up, and that was 3 days after my spine surgery. I was going to be paralyzed. I couldn't play piano. My fingers weren't working right. I was stumbling when I walked. And I went to this guy at the hospital for special surgery, and he said, "You need surgery on your spine, and you need it yesterday. You're going to be paralyzed." Because the arthritis was going into my spine, not into the nerves and causing pain. I didn't have pain, but it was causing coldness and numbness. And he said, "It's blocking the signals. Your spine transmits the highway where the signals go." So anyway, I'm okay. Listen, in America, we have great doctors. That's where I was going when I said I'm glad to be an American for a million reasons, but I have such good care. If I lived somewhere else, I had friends in Canada for a while. I said, I'm kind of jealous.
Canada's horrible.
Well, that's what I didn't realize that. I said to my Canadian friends,
you wouldn't know it in the news today. You wouldn't know how bad it is. I mean, literally, most people come down here from Canada to be able to go to a doctor.
I was sponsoring a guy in recovery, and I said, I'm jealous, man. You're care-free, and at the time, I was paying for my care. And I mean, I had insurance, so there was a cap on it. He said, let me tell you something. I live in communist Canada. I can get an MRI. There's an 8-month wait.
Yeah, that's exactly it. And that's probably pretty short. Because, I mean, I've heard years, terrible
But,
stuff.
but
So I wanted to bring up real.
I just want to say I've had great care. I've had a lot of crap wrong with me, but I've had great care. I live in New York. I went right to Sloan Kettering when I got the cancer, and I got this lovely Irish lass who said, "Oh, we'll be putting some seeds in here, won't we?" And she was just terrific. And so
That is an awesome story. So I promised I wouldn't make too big of a deal about this, but we're at right almost at an hour. We still got those 600 people on. So you're a great storyteller as advertised. Jack here, what advice would you? Because we're going off in different aspects, but how did this affect your writing? How did that? But what advice would you give to someone who's starting at indie publishing or
yeah,
being published indie today?
and
then the rest are about your characters, our
Well,
addictions or so forth.
Well, that's okay. Give me a couple of minutes on this because that's a great question, and I think people need to hear about it. So, it's a great time to be publishing as an independent author. Okay. So here's what happened. 5 years ago, I read a book called How to Get an Agent: The Cynic's Guide to Getting an Agent, or something a lot like that. And I read the book, and what I learned was I don't want to get an agent. Because what the book told me was if I'm not in the top 5% earners of an agent's clientele, I'm not going to get a lot of attention. And there's a pretty fair chance that I'm not going to go anywhere as an author. Maybe I am brilliant, and maybe, listen, if I'm one of the top 5% that gets in there, more power to me. And of course, I love that. But reading that book told me not to get an agent. So here's what I did. It's a couple of steps, so I hope Rodd will give me a chance to talk about this. First,
I got your back, brother. Keep going.
Okay, so first thing I did was there's a bunch of newsletters out there that you can advertise your books in. They are things like the Fussy Librarian, Free Booksy, Bargain Booksy. Just Google newsletters for independent authors and you'll find them. Here's the problem, and they have memberships of thousands, okay? And they cost $50, $100, $200 to get in. Your books will go to all the people who subscribe to those newsletters. And it's a lot of people. And the biggest one is a thing called BookBub. It's not easy to get in. I haven't gotten in to this day. But it's very expensive. It's like $2,000 or something to get in. But they have like 1 million subscribers, so your book will get out there. Here's the problem with that. I started seeing videos. You know how videos or ads follow you around? I guess Facebook and the internet realize I'm an author.
The algorithm? You talking about algorithms?
Yeah, I'm talking about.
You look at something and you keep getting pumped in Facebook on the same sort of.
Yeah, it's called retargeting. I advertise. I do a lot of advertising. It's called retargeting. The ads that once you go to a website or once you engage with an ad on Facebook or once you go on Facebook, if you look at a page, you're going to start seeing the stuff from the same people, and it's called retargeting. Okay, so I started to see ads from a guy and the ads were like made for me. They were like, are you an author who is advertising your books through the online newsletters, but you have to sell your book for 50 cents or $1 or $1.99, way less than it's worth because your books are really good? And that was me. I was advertising my books. I was selling some books, a few hundred here or there, which is nice. But that was me. So I started to watch, and I'm looking and I'm seeing, well, it's just some guy who has some system. And I thought, well, there's just some guy somewhere, wherever, who has some system for selling something. And there's a lot of independent entrepreneurs, and some are good and some are not. Anyway, I looked at this guy's stuff, and I started to see testimonials that gave the people's first and last names. They were authors who used his stuff, and they were giving them, which to me was, that's interesting. And I looked them up, and sure enough, they were authors. They were selling a lot of books. And then I saw, and this is the thing that convinced me, then I saw that I started to watch his videos, and the video that convinced me said, listen, our system is not cheap, and it's a lot of work. And that convinced me because they weren't promising pie in the sky results. You're going to make $1 million, you're going to sell a zillion books. It was more realistic. It's work, and it costs something. And at the time, it cost about $1,000, and I did it. It cost about $1,000, and it was a ton of work. And I got to tell you, I sold a lot of books, and that was 3 years ago. And I've sold about 4,000 books since then. And
Wow.
And the guy was an Air Force pilot who does a lot of work. I give his name. He was an Air Force pilot who does a lot of work with Fortune 100 companies, and he's the real deal. And I sold a lot of books. Can I name the system?
Yeah, sure.
Yeah, it's called AMMO. AML, AMMO. His name is Steve Piper, Pieper. And I'm telling you, I sell a lot of books. It's not easy. He has a system. It's a lot of work. And it costs some stuff. And it costs, at the very beginning, I think it cost a real lot. And then when I did it, it cost about $1,000. And now I don't know what it costs. You know.
Is it like ammo.com, like what I just wrote there?
I don't know.
Well, you said ammo, so I didn't
that's
know.
Spelling. I don't know if that's his website, but it is AMMO. It's Authors Marketing something. I don't know what it stands for. But his name is Steve Piper, Pieper. His author name is Lars Emmerich. He writes thrillers. But basically what they do is they teach you how to use Facebook ads to sell with a funnel, and it works. And I'll tell you, disclaimer, I don't get a penny. Anyone who joins him, I don't get a penny. I have no connection to him other than I'm one of his subscribers. Yeah, Pieper, I believe. I'm not positive, but I believe it's Pieper. If you want to Google that in the background. That's just from this 68-year-old's memory. I could be wrong, but I believe it might be Pieper. You'll have to look. But if you just plug
I'm going to put them both up. Pieper, right?
Yeah.
That was the other one you had there, right? So I'm just doing it because our friend there is asking the question.
Yeah. And you know what? If you put my information at some point in the chat,
I'm going to be throwing that out pretty soon here.
Yeah, people can reach out to me and I'll answer your questions. I'm not here to BS anybody. I don't make any money from that. And frankly, listen, I sell a lot of books, but I spend money to sell books, and it costs me. I don't pay anyone else. I do it all myself, but I do spend money on the advertising, and I'm not always profitable.
You have to. It's a business. I mean, we forget as creatives that it's also a business. There's a business aspect to it. The James Show here.
Yeah, see,
another show here. How did you decide to explore race? This goes back a little bit because you were talking about this, race and historical drama in your novels, and I already know the answer because it came from your history. I mean, you lived in that neighborhood. But let's just build it out a little bit, a little more color between the layers for the James Show here. Another podcast.
Yeah. So. As I said, when I was a little kid, I was on the receiving end of some anti-Semitic violence. And I heard growing up, in high school, I was around all kinds of people who use different words for being Jewish. And, I heard all about that. And when I joined one of the fraternities, you had to get pretty beat up to join one of these fraternities. And the fact that I was Jewish meant I had to get a little bit of an extra beating, or quite a bit of an extra beating. To get into the fraternities. So I had that experience. And then what happened is many years later, like maybe 10, 15 years ago, I saw some of the people I was friendly with when I was in high school who had been pretty bigoted, pretty racist, through ignorance. They were around their parents' dinner tables and they heard their parents use these words. And now they have blended families. Now they have families that are multiracial, multi-religion. And what I learned is they got to know people who were not the same as them. And they came to know these people and they came to accept people as human beings. And I'd love to see more of that nowadays. I think there's too much demonizing nowadays. And I'm guilty of some of it. I'm guilty of some of it, but I try not to be. I try to give people the benefit of the doubt as best I can. Thank you for putting that up.
So I just want to I'll bring it back up. I just wanted you to see and make sure we're all good there. Ariel, I do recognize her name. I just a wonderful person. How do you now? I like setting some of these up because I'll change it a bit, right? So Ariel's asking, how do you manage writing about trauma without affecting your mental health? And the opposite is actually true. It does affect your mental health, but not in the way she's asking it. It's the other way around. It's like I talked about in the monologue. I started writing because I needed a place to bleed, and I use that word for a specific reason, because when you're like you said, your characters are you in each and every case, and you give them this and you give them that. Well, sometimes you just need to kind of bleed out a little bit just so you can relieve the stress, the tension. The old days they used to put the things for the bloodsuckers to suck blood out of it, and that's not exactly what I mean, but just imagery wise, leeches. Yeah, okay. So writing for me, it gives me that place that I can just bleed, just kind of sit within myself. So I'm assuming that's how you're going to answer, but I want to give you both sides of that, hers and mine. So go, shoot, do it, man.
Yeah, there's more to that. So yes, writing is absolutely a catharsis. It's very helpful with my mental health. But I want to say something about depression. People don't realize that depression isn't, oh geez, I'm so sad, I can't seem to shake the blues. Depression is something else. And we have someone in my family who I love. We have a bunch of mental health in my family. It doesn't just run in my family, it gallops in my family. We've had some suicides. We've had a few suicides in my family, people who went through it. Two people who jumped off the roof in my family who died that way. And I have someone who I'm not going to say who it is, but someone I'm very, very close to in my family, who I adore, who has had mental health. And I never understood her. And then in 2005, I got sick with mental health issues, with depression, very serious depression. And I kind of went, oh, because I had it. Now I understood, and I called this person in my family. I said, honey, I get it. And for 6 weeks, I had to sit in a dark room with silence because everything was too loud and too bright and I had sensory overload, and it was a mental health thing, and it was hot. Yeah. I tell you, all of the surgeries and the spinal stuff, and the wearing the bag, and the cancer, the depression was worse than all of it. And I have my characters go through that, and I have characters who tear their hair out because they can't handle stuff. I'm writing a book now where, as a little girl, she's kidnapped 2 books earlier, and she's held by sex traffickers with her cousin, and they're rescued. But 2 books later, they're still traumatized, and they still, the boy is drinking. He's 12. When I was 12, I was stealing my parents' alcohol, and I was going in the bedroom and I was pouring it all into a glass, and I was putting water in the vodka, and I was putting apple juice in the scotch, and he's going out drinking, and he's burning things, and the little girl is tearing her hair out, and she's wetting her bed, and I wet my bed till I was about 11, and and so trauma and writing is a two-way street. The trauma it comes out of my writing, and hopefully people read and they go, yeah. My kids got that. Now I understand. But the other part of it is I write because of the trauma, and the trauma comes out in the writing, and it communicates to other people. And I have to write this stuff. That's why I write it. I have to.
Yeah. With Julia here, kind of a little flip to it a bit. What lessons from addiction recovery carry over into your characters? Because, like, I mean, you talked about the cancer, the this, that. Well, I assume that I know there's a lot of that side of your life built
So
within the same characters or different characters. Are you combining that stuff, or is there crossover? Talk
mostly
to me.
different characters. I don't set
That's what I
out.
thought.
I don't set out for them to be different characters. I start writing about them, and they write themselves eventually.
Yeah.
But the lessons from addiction is, to come into addiction, to come into recovery, we have to hit what are called bottoms. We have to get to a point where they call it, we talk about God, G-O-D. Well, God can also be gift of desperation. And when we become desperate enough that we're willing to do anything, and I touched on this earlier, I think it was the show. But so when I was a little kid, I didn't get along with my father. Okay, my father had trauma from his polio when he was a little kid. He had polio when he was 2, and he had trauma from that. Then he had a kid, me, he couldn't handle, and he didn't deal with it very well. And we had a lot of conflict. But so when it came time, when I had my first child, my wife and I had our first son in 1990. I vowed that I was going to be more understanding with my kids than he was with me. And what happened was one day I had my 1-year-old. I talked about this, I think, a little earlier, and I was taking care of my son, and I was watching him, and I was high, and he got hurt. And I had that gift of desperation at that moment, and I became willing to do anything. And that's how I ended up in a meeting, in a 12-step meeting. In fact, I went to the meeting a few times, and I didn't go in. I drove away. And finally, I went in, and it was this big meeting called Surf City, near where I live. And there was 80 people in 1991. It looked like, 1992, it looked like a bikers convention. At the time, I wasn't riding Harleys yet. And I was scared. I'm sitting in the back row, and I'm cross-talking. I'm telling this guy that I have the virus, which I didn't, AIDS virus. I didn't. I was lying. I was trying to sound cool. And he looks at me and he says, "Hey, listen, man, I've had the virus for 9 years, and I'm living with it. I'm not dying from it. And the meeting's up there." And I got a little bit of a resentment towards him, but I started to pay attention. And I listened, and I heard the message. And I heard my pain, my guts, my terror, my fear, my self-loathing coming out of that speaker's mouth. And I couldn't believe there were other people like me.
Yeah, that's the most amazing thing when you when you first start on this journey, is how much you go to yourself. Oh my God, I'm not the only one. Because it's a place that's it's not about judging, it's about helping, right? So, Richard here, I want you to read the last 2 comments here that I see, and then we'll go into a final comment.
Yeah, amazing insights on turning pain into purpose. Thank you. Thank you for listening, Richard. Thank you.
And Chris, the same thing. Go ahead and read that one.
Chris, yeah, loving this live show. David's journey is truly motivating. I'm going to cry because this is David's journey is just something I'm trying to survive.
Yeah, you're a sponsor, so you affect a lot of people. We're talking about what you do day in and day out through your characters, as well as in real life. What you host the show right on Wednesdays, right?
Well, it's 2 different things. So
not a show, a group. Sorry, I didn't.
Meeting. Yeah, I host NA meetings. I don't know if I'm even allowed to say. I don't know if they would want me to say, but there's a 24. There's a 24-hour meeting somewhere that's always on, and I host it on Sundays, Tuesdays, and Fridays.
3 days.
3 times a week, 2-hour meetings 3 times a week. And then separately from that, I sponsor 7 or 8 individuals. And all I'm trying to do is help. They got to do the work. It's step work. 12-step program. There's 12 steps. You got to do the work. They got to do it. It's up to them. I'm here to help them do the work. I just try to encourage them like you're doing with me. I just try to say, hey, you can get through. Listen, it's Monday. Where I live, it's 3:48 p.m. You can stay clean on Monday at 3:48 p.m. You can do Monday. Just do Monday.
Yeah, baby steps. So you've got the same 600 people here, and to wind this down, You've got a big fan club here. Before the big wave, and I'll put you in the green room. What would you want to leave these 600 or so people here?
I would say whatever it is, whatever's going on with you, it's okay, and you can deal with it. And you know what? You can all, if you need help, there's help out there, and you can always just say quietly, "Give me some help." Not that God's up there, but just show me what to do, and that works for me.
Yeah.
Now, I'd love it if some of you were mystery readers and wanted to read my stuff. The website's there, but I'd love to talk to you. I'd love to hear.
Right there, right? All right, my friend. Well, why don't you give everybody a big wave, and I'll see you on the other sides while I wrap this puppy up. All right, that was a good show, man, and I appreciate you guys staying around through the whole show, which is not an uncommon thing. You're here for a reason, but this message obviously resonates, and that's what we do at this show is we bring on experts like David E. Feldman here. Sorry, I don't know why that came out that way. But not only a mystery, and he's got. We didn't even get into the TV series that are based on the books. It's just the extension of his media resources. So not only through that, but then there's that personal journey that leads, that fires, that fuels the writing, and that journey went from depression and addiction and failure to purpose, right? I mean, somebody said that along the way in here, and it's so true because so many of us don't. And so here's a place, I always talk about, and he talked about he needed to talk to somebody. Producer Barbie was what was and still is that for me, and not an easy thing to be, but. I'm here today because of that, and you all know that. And so it was a real honor having David on the show with us today because it's obviously so much of a part of today's show and today's world. Sorry, and today's show. But I appreciate you guys being here. Please subscribe to the channel and. It really does help support these messages, and we're here for you. Let's keep this community this tight, and the show would not be the show without you guys, man. So I just, as I say quite often, I love you guys. Thank you for what you're doing, and go say hi to somebody today. Go. If you don't know somebody that you see around, just wave to somebody. That'll start a vibe. We talked about that energy, right? So, it's important in today's world and how we affect those around us. And I'm Rodd Duff. I'm your host. I'm out.
Before you leave, if you'd like to watch another one of the podcasts, click the first link in the description. We love having you here and we appreciate all your support.
And with that, producer Barbie and I are out.
Click the links. Click the link.